Hello and greetings, everyone. Welcome to another Educator Innovator Hangout on Air. Tonight is June 13th, 2017, and I'm your host for this Hangout. I'm Christina Cantrell. I'm Associate Director of National Programs here at the National Writing Project, and I'm based here in Philadelphia. I'm really excited tonight. We get to kick off a three-part conversation that will extend into July. And this conversation involves a book that Kira Baker Doyle recently published let me hold it up here on my little notes, but Transformative Teachers, Teacher Leadership and Learning in a Connected World. So I'm really excited about this book, about the educators highlighted in this book, the work that is described. I think there's a great blurb that Bud Hunt, I often quote Bud Hunt, and I'm sure Bud will make fun of me for doing this again, but he's on the back and he wrote this great blurb, and I think it helps to sort of highlight what this book's about. So he writes, "This book is a reminder that transformative teaching didn't begin with the internet. There's a rich history of teachers and learners working together to explore and better the world." So I'm really excited to be here to talk to two educators whom I know have been working for a long time in this area, way before the internet. And we've been colleagues and we've learned from each other along the way. We're actually all in Philadelphia too, which makes this super special. And so I'm just really excited to be here. So Kira Baker Doyle is here, the author of this book, and Sam Reed, one of the educators highlighted in this book, and a colleague of mine from the Philadelphia Writing Project. So excited that you're both here. Thank you. And thank you for anyone who's tuning in, either watching the archive or if you're live here today. We're really excited to have you with us. We'll be tweeting and sharing some links out at the hashtag Connected Learning. So if you have thoughts or questions or ideas that you'd like to put forward and bring into our conversation, we encourage you to do so and to tweet them to us, and then we'll pick them up and bring them into our talk tonight. Every link and that we mentioned too during the show and resources, we will also post with the archive of this show, so you can easily get to everything that we're talking about there. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to get started, and I think we should just do a first round of introductions so you guys can just introduce yourselves, say what brings you here today, and what you're really excited to talk about. Sam, you're to my left. Maybe you could start.
Hey, Christina, thanks for having me. It's a real honor. And for everybody out there in the internet world, a little bit about myself. My name is Reed. My first name is Sam, but my students call me Reed, so I've kind of taken on this new moniker. I'm calling myself Reed, like James Bond, like Bond, James, right? And so my name is Sam Reed, and my tag is I teach my students to read, write, and make sense of the world. And I teach at this really awesome school called the U School, which is an innovative, competency-based, mastery-based high school in Philadelphia, part of the Innovation Network here in Philadelphia. And I've been fortunate to be a member teacher consultant of the Philadelphia Writing Project for a number of years. And through the Writing Project, I met with Kira, followed her work extensively. Her work has influenced my work, and I'm happy that I was like profiled in her book. And I mean, I was profiled in her book, but prior to her book, she started a blog series where she was like doing this, lifting up transformative teachers, and then to see it become a book is really, really awesome. So I'm looking forward to sharing and sharing with folks today.
That's great. Thanks, Sam. Okay, Kira, you're up.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, so I, as Christina already introduced me somewhat, I'm a professor at Arcadia University, which is right outside of Philadelphia. And I was born and raised in Philadelphia and taught in Philadelphia beforehand, so I have very deep roots in this city, and really committed to kind of the teachers of this city particularly, but also I'm thinking a lot about urban education, thinking a lot about how to like Sam said, raise up, support teachers, especially teachers who are organizing for social justice and equity in urban communities. And a lot of my research in the past has been on this question of how we can build networks of support as teachers. And I use this kind of newfangled theory for education called social network theory, which really helps to get a very kind of a vision of how our networks, our relationships map out, and how that the mapping out of our relationships, if we understand that, we can understand a little bit more about what resources and support and information we have out there in our community, with the people that we work with. So that's a little bit about me. I'm sure we'll get deeper into the book itself, but that is some good background.
Excellent. Thank you, Kira. And yeah, I mean, you know, just to introduce myself and my interest in this too, actually. You know, this book is very interesting to me. I mean, I've worked with Kira and Sam and learned with them for years. And then this book is really interesting to me in the way that it brings some of the work around connected learning and some of the social justice work and organizing that I've been seeing teachers do for many years together into this sort of dialogue that I think is really strong and powerful. And so tonight we're going to take the book and sort of take the different parts of the book over the next few weeks and sort of have a chance to talk through it and think about these pieces together, because I think they are very much, there's a lot of pieces coming together here in dialogue, I believe. And, you know, so let's talk some of that through and share, you know, open up further conversations around this work. So personally, it's very exciting to me to see, and also as working with the writing project, we intersect with a lot of different networks. So seeing all these different networks and all these teachers within this world that Kira sort of brought a lot of us together in this book. And I think that's super thrilling and exactly what we need to do in an increasingly connected world. Tonight, we're really going to focus on sort of the first part, which is what is a transformative teacher? That's the first part of the book. And so we can sort of explore that a bit tonight. In July, we'll do a second part around designing, organizing, and leading in a connected world. So kind of the next layer of that. And then in part 3, we'll talk about sort of transformative teachers and educational change. So more on a sort of systems level and thinking more widely about our networks and our organizations. Of course, all of this is intermingled within each other within all of these pieces. So I'm thrilled that we can work on this together and have this opportunity. So thank you both for being here. So when I started reading this book, I sort of loved like the first sentence. So Kira writes, in 2010, I met a teacher who helped to initiate a change in my understanding of transformative teacher learning and leadership in the digital age. That teacher is Samuel Reed III. So it's a great sort of opening of the story, and I would love for you guys to talk about sort of that relationship that you've fostered over time and its importance for this work around, you know, what is a transformative teacher and what does it mean to be in a connected world?
I don't know who you want us to come in first.
Yeah.
Why don't you go ahead first, Sam?
Yeah, so I mean, when I read that as well, like it kind of like, whoa, like it was awesome, but it was also like, yeah, we like this work that we do on a daily, I mean, we're doing it, but when you really look at, it's beyond like technology, it's beyond the internet, and the fact that like I see this working and like collaborating with Kira really comes out. And basically what it points out to me is like there's this hybrid like there's this online space, but then there's this face-to-face space, and like the online space happening in of its own self it's okay, but that's not where the real power happens. The power happens when you bring that hybrid aspect together, and at the same time, it's like the pace in which you know, technology and the internet is like transformed, like just even like thinking about the gig economy and how you know, we're leveraging social media and the like, but like how do we use that for real life projects, and how do we like allow our students to use it, how do we allow ourselves to use it, and like just being again profiled and featured in the book was really validating for the work that we're doing. And again, this is like work that everyday teachers are doing all the time.
Yeah, and so I would jump in and say that I think Sam and I have been learning from each other for a long time. And it's been a really, really great experience to be able to be someone who has, at this point, I am able to get a glimpse of not only Sam's work, but the work of many teachers that work with him, you know, and teachers that are kind of across the country who are doing similar work, and try and bring some of those stories together to build out a larger kind of narrative and story of change, of transformation. But for me, it's also a very real kind of one-on-one learning from educators, and particularly from Sam. You know, he's been working, I've been learning with him since my early days in looking just at networks in general, not just online networks, but you know, a while, I guess when I just first came out of grad school and my dissertation work was in looking at how teachers build networks of support, I kind of started talking with Sam about these ideas, and he was interested, and it was really interesting to me to see how he kind of took this up in his own work, how it informed his work, and how he changed it and transformed it to make sense of it in his context, and also within this context of the digital world. And so, you know, it was funny because I wrote this book way back, The Networked Teacher, way back before a lot of teachers were even thinking about being online, and everyone kept on asking me, well, is your Networked Teacher about teachers online? And I said, no, it's just about relationships. But then I started thinking, maybe I should do something about teachers, both inhabiting those online spaces and those teachers that are you know, also taking advantage of some of the digital spaces to organize. And I realized that they're right here, right? Sam's right here. And so I can learn, and we can all learn from the ways in which teachers are really thoughtfully leveraging some of the connected technologies are out there to do what they've always done, these transformative teachers, to work for social justice and equity in their classroom, and to connect with other colleagues and lift up the profession on the whole. So, so it's been really a joy to be that person who's able to hear all these different stories and be a part of all these different stories, and also be a part of the relationships with other teachers, and then have the opportunity to share those stories. I see myself as just someone who can broadcast the work that that I see, the good work that I see that's being done on you know, around the U.S. and around the world.
Yeah, that's great. And I sort of love the, you know, this idea, it's just about relationships. And I feel like what I really appreciate about your book is that it like starts with those relationships, and actually those relationships are core to the work, whether it's online or in face-to-face spaces, and then how those relationships unfold. So, and I often think there is sort of a key relationship that enters you into different networks and communities of practice that, you know, and I think it's lovely that we can kick off this series with Sam here as one of your, one of the one of the core relationships that started to build those dialogues. So that's great.
Yeah, so Christina, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
I just wanted to hop in and piggyback or veggie off of what Kira said in terms of like how her book, The Network Teacher, was like so fundamental. And one of the key takeaways was that she talked about like mapping out your network, right? And so, and when you're faced with a problem and you want to think about how to leverage social capital, doing that mapping is really critical. And I can give you a case in point. For example, I was teaching at a middle school that was on the closing blocks, right? And we were, a lot of schools were being closed around in our district, and I looked at my network. I looked at teachers, I looked at students, I looked at media makers, and using all of those avenues, we put on a campaign to actually stave off the closing of our school, right? And so I had students become activists, writing letters, making testimonies. I worked with the Media Mobilizing Project. We produced a video. We had our puppets from Spiral Q puppet theaters, which we did a puppetry project that wasn't related to like the school closures, but we brought out the puppets, and when it was time to like bring notice to our plight, our puppets were out there, right? And so like it was literally mapping out our resources, including puppets, including people, including media, to put on this campaign that actually like helped to save our school. Although it ended up being temporarily, because eventually this year is actually getting shut down. But it was through this intentionality of looking at networks. And then I moved to the new school where I'm working at, the U school. And on our first year, our principal, the first thing he makes us do is let's do an asset map of our community and our resources. And this was our principal having us in our first orientation go around the neighborhood and like map out what are the resources, what can we leverage to like connect our students with learning and connect the community to ourselves. And so that the book Connected Learning was real foundational. And in this current iteration of Transformative Teacher, and I'll let Kira talk more about it, she talks about these agentive tools, right? And these are some of these I've like, through creating this map, I've kind of used those tools, and she can elaborate more on that. But that really is resonating with me in this the Transformative Teacher.
Great, Sam. That's having been here during that example, that's a powerful example of the ways communities can come together, including the students, including the things you built during the year. Like that's really powerful. Kara, do you want to elaborate on this idea of agentive tools and agency in this work?
Yeah, and this is something that we're going to talk a lot about in our second webinar, because in that second webinar, we're going to focus on collaborative work and the ways in which teachers are organizing and develop kind of collective agency and collective power, and the kinds of practices they use to develop that collective power. So I'm going to put a pin in that because it is a really powerful piece. But before we get into thinking about the collective work, it's good to also think about the individual kind of mindset, habits of mind, and the kinds of ways of thinking, ways of being that many of the transformative teachers that I've worked with kind of take on and try to learn more about. So we'll talk a little bit about that, I'm sure, in this webinar too. And I also want to kind of back up and say, the core of what Sam's story speaks to is that there's a need, that Sam sees a need as a teacher, and it's a need around that's kind of very much based in social justice and equity. And I see a really strong relationship between that need, the need that teachers identify when they see that their students' needs are not being met, that their educational that something in that educational institution or environment is lacking, and when teachers are feeling like they need a voice, they need power to help meet those needs, then it's the network and the organizing that becomes really, really important. You see that in his story. And I think I'm going to shift a little bit into this talk of the digital, because we haven't talked that much about the digital, right? So we're in this time period right now where the digital is very, very prevalent. It's hugely prevalent right now in all of our politics, right? We see it every day, we live it. And yet there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect between literature and research on teachers who are really organizing for equity and social justice and the digital. And it's coming more, but I think one of the reasons that there's been a disconnect is that a lot of the digital discourse is very much framed in a corporatist, market-based, consumer kind of perspective. And folks who are looking to organize for social justice, looking for meeting the needs of children, it doesn't feel right. There's a disconnect there. And what we need to do in some ways is to disentangle the connection between the digital and the corporate, or the digital and the consumer kind of perspective, and see ways in which teachers can leverage connected technologies, digital spaces, to do the same kinds of things that they're doing on the ground, face-to-face, and more in different ways, right? And what I've tried to do in this book is look for folks who are already exploring this and who are starting to innovate around this and build networks and relationships in this way. And I would say that it's emergent, right? That it's happening, but in some ways, because there's not a lot of conversation out there, I would say National Writing Project actually is at the forefront of bringing those conversations out there and telling those stories. But because there's not a huge amount of conversation that links the social justice perspective and the social justice organizing with the digital and the kind of connected educator perspective, then we kind of lose out. So I'm really hoping to bring some conversations together around that through this work, and highlight some teachers who are working through that and figuring out how to do that.
I would, it makes me, I mean, the way we've been at Educator, Innovator, and thinking about connected learning, and that connected learning is about like the shared purpose, for instance. So that need that Sam, that you talked about, and that motivated the Save the Schools campaign, and I imagine it's the same need the students were feeling, right? I mean, that's a shared purpose that was able to be fostered. And I do feel like these pieces sort of get lost in the connectedness around digital. I really agree with you that, like, that actually shared purpose can happen in lots of different spaces, and there are powerful ways that shared purpose can happen online as well as offline, and that we actually have a great deal of knowledge about how it historically has happened, right? So tapping into that and fostering that, I think that's really important. In your book, you write about sort of some key influential cultural movements that you feel like really help to, I don't know how you would say this, like they sort of help to influence and get at what's happening here. I'm not sure if that's how you would, but one of them you name is participatory culture. So maybe we could talk a bit about that. Grassroots community organizing as a sort of key fundamental piece that influences this work, and then also teacher inquiry. And I'd love to think about those three pieces together. Do you want to kick us off with that, and then we'll, yeah, why don't you frame that for us, and then we can talk about it a little bit.
Okay, sure. So, I really wanted to put out the landscape for folks in this beginning part of the book of all of some of the really key movements that are shaping the work of transformative teachers and the work of education more broadly speaking, and talking to many of the teachers, doing lots of in-depth kind of look at some of the organizing and organizations that the teachers are involved in. It's what I saw were that there were these three, what I called cultural movements, that seemed to kept coming back and also overlapping in really important ways, right? So participatory culture, which is been coined by Henry Jenkins, is this idea in which, I think it was rooted in this kind of the idea of fandom, that fans kind of have some agency in shaping the conversation around a shared interest. But then I think it grew over time to communities of folks who are really trying to both build their own practice, learn about, and it could be any kind of practice, right? It could be like anything from knitting to gaming to running, whatever, but that they're coming together around a practice to help each other get better. And that they're sharing some of the insights, some of the things that they've created or discovered in that way. And they themselves are pushing the learning forward, pushing that field forward, right? And so that seemed to be triggered even more by the digital, because there were now these spaces where people could find people halfway across the world who were interested in learning the same XYZ, right? The knitter who's in Philadelphia and the knitter who's in San Francisco, who are working on the same stitch, can talk to each other, right? So that broadens that out. So there was something about the triggering of the digital and participatory culture and this idea of sharing, collaborating to improve practice that was very resonant with a lot of the teachers that I work with, and also resonant, obviously traced back to this broader participatory culture that was shaped by the digital. Then for a long time, we've also, I would say a longer time, the idea of teacher inquiry has been around. And this is about teachers taking charge of their learning, of their profession, learning from what they're doing, learning and bringing that learning back into their practice. A lot of it overlaps, right, with this participatory culture. And then thirdly, there's this idea of community organizing. And that really centers the work on the social justice perspective, organizing for power, or using certain strategies to build relationships and build coalitions to organize for power and organize for change. And what I saw is that these, like historically, all of these cultural movements started kind of overlapping in really important ways for teachers. And that the digital allowed them to push that even further. So you see collective problem solving, strategic use of multiple kinds of public spaces, both online and offline, right? You see a real sense of expertise grounded in the folks who are doing the work, right? All of that overlaps in those areas, and are, I would say, really core characteristics, principles of transformative teaching, whether or not you are digital, even though we can see that the digital has had an impact in shaping those, particularly participatory culture movement, but some of the other movements as well.
Wow, yeah, I mean the bringing those together really resonates for me in terms of what I've been seeing. Sam, what do you? I guess just to say, I'm really excited too to bring participatory culture and teacher inquiry with grassroots organizing. And I know, Sam, you've been doing a lot of that kind of work in Philadelphia over time. So it is it's a provocative space that I think you know a lot about. So I'd love to hear you.
Yeah, and also kind of makes me think of some of my colleagues in Philadelphia, like Anissa, Juan Rob, and Kelly, who were active leaders in the Teacher Action Group. And one thing we started realizing is that like the power of stories and like how stories move movements. And so in our earlier days of becoming these teacher activists, like we knew we were, I wouldn't say we're up against these pressures of like the corporatization of messaging and media, and like what can we do? Like how can it, sometimes it looks like it's so unsurmountable, right? Like who are we as teachers? Because we have to teach, and we have to raise our families, and said, you know what, we need to do this campaign around like flipping the script. And so we came up with a whole year campaign of like flipping the script. And basically when we were flipping the script, we were using media, using networks to tell the stories that we wanted to be told. And some of those stories were like just getting together and face to face, like doing a story slam. But sometimes those stories were like creating a blog, or creating Instagram, or a Twitter, a hashtag, or like using these tools to like tell the story of teachers, of everyday teachers. And like Kira featured a bunch of us in our work. And again, like it's just ordinary teachers doing the extraordinary stuff that we do all the time. And that's what makes this book like really so powerful.
Yeah, I want to highlight that is that I didn't want to create this myth of the super teacher that people kind of felt like this is impossible. I wanted to help tell the stories of people who are doing this work, and they're doing it in part because there's that need, that's the core of the need, but also they are really conscious of how important finding others to support their work and building those support networks are, and that is a really important source of the power. All those folks you can see are really, they don't feel alone because they're actively finding ways to connect, finding ways to build relationships. And it's also not to say that every challenge is met with glory, right? That oftentimes you're pushing forward and you don't win every battle, but that you have that community with you, and that helps you kind of feel a sense of sustainability. And I would also say what Sam said about telling stories was also something that resonated across many of the teachers that I talked with and interviewed for this work. That it was when I talk about the characteristics of transformative teachers and highlight some of those characteristics, one of those ways of knowing that that is critical is thinking about the role of stories and voice, and how, not just for teachers and their work and organizing for change, but even within classrooms. And you can see it, this parallel, I don't know if it's parallel, but you can see with a lot of teachers, they're not only trying to raise their voices outward and collectively and share their stories, but they're also trying to help their students share their stories and flip the script about them. So that seems to be a very important piece of the characterization of today's transformative teachers. I would also kind of tell some stories. So Sam already mentioned Kelly and Anissa. We can thinking broader, talked with folks at Educator, and specifically with Jose Luis Vilson, who is one of the folks who started to organize Educator. Educator is a hashtag community. It's not just hashtag, but the hashtag kind of creates this centering for the community, and they have regular meetups online as well, and conversations online, and they also meet offline, and they have all kinds of ways to connect. But their purpose is also around storytelling, in a sense, in terms of pushing the dialogue forward around race and education, saying the things that haven't been said, or people are afraid to say, or don't feel safe saying, and finding ways of pushing that a little bit forward. So again, that theme of storytelling comes up, and the collective work to support each other in the storytelling, that you're not out there by yourself. And then interestingly, I do some work looking at the rise of ed camps. And ed camps, are not so, they're hybrid. They're somewhat online, somewhat offline in a lot of kind of meeting in groups. They're also constantly telling stories about their work. And that's how the word of that real movement has gotten out, is through this real urgency to spread the word about the work and to connect with others and get others involved. So I'll leave it at that for now, because I'm sure there's other questions.
I was trying to tweet to all those networks, because they're pretty powerful networks that you mentioned. Sam, did you want to jump in there?
I'll chime in because I think you're going to lead us somewhere else, and so I don't want to like sidetrack.
Oh, go ahead. I mean, we're pretty free flowing.
Cool. Yeah. So I think I just wanted to chime in about like how this, like, using and working with students as well as helping students to flip the script, and so and then how using like these design thinking principles to kind of move the work along. And what I've noticed in design thinking, particularly in our practice at the new school where I'm working, where we kind of center our work a lot around design thinking, is that we always we kind of start with this like map mapping process where we're like thinking about the end in mind, and then scaffolding opportunities and experiences where we can use like curriculum where students are learning like the core fundamentals of reading, writing, and making sense of the world, but then they're also producing relevant things that mean something to them as well. And I just think that's like real super important. And then the opportunity that we get to like highlight and showcase the power of student voice. And we had I have an example of one of our students who was working around the letters to the president. And yeah, I mean, he's going through he developed a really sound, letter to a president, but he was into poetry, and he's like, I want to turn this letter into a poem. And so he turned it into this spoken word piece, and it was really powerful. But he also was interested in film. He's like, I want to take this this poem and make it into a documentary. And so then he turned it into a documentary, and it was so evocative, so powerful. Then I nominated him for the National Liberty Museum. He got nominated for a WHYY Youth Media Award, and like just the power of like designing this really, taking the letters to the president, designing curriculum around that, and then allowing kids to like find their voice and connect with that is just really a really powerful platform. And I think we need to find more ways to do this for our students, because otherwise, like, if they're not connecting with the learning, then what's the purpose, right? And so again, that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, I was also thinking about that too, because this power of making it, you hear it in all these stories. Kira, do you want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah, when Sam started sharing this story, I immediately thought to another kind of key characteristic that a highlight that came through in a lot of the folks that I talked to, and that is this both a commitment to learning through doing the thinking about production-oriented kind of learning and work, which also ties back to connected learning and very, very clearly, and kind of that design-oriented thinking, and then also kind of the importance of multimodal learning, right? Like that we experience and produce our learning in all kinds of media and modes and ways, and that helps us grow and learn more, right? I see, and again, I saw that parallel from both the teachers in the classroom to the teachers organizing with each other, right? So we see this real embrace of art and making and design, also in the organizing of bringing teachers together around a common issue or a common question or something like that, which I thought was really telling. It makes sense that if you're doing that in your classroom, you're doing that for your profession. But I also thought it felt a little bit different because this is breaking outside of that very top-down structure of not only breaking outside of the very top-down structure of traditional professional development, but it's also breaking outside of the kind of norms of texts, what textual production means, what it means to be using all kinds of materials and things like that. So it was exciting kind of see that. Trying to think of like some examples. I mean, Sam's already given you the examples in a lot of these ways. But I really, one of the things that I recall, I think, was Josh Block, who is also a Philly teacher. He does a lot of work in his curriculum that also expands out into the kind of his broader connections with scholars, with teachers and educators and folks. And he did this project called the Social Justice Alphabet, where kids kind of created these incredible photographs. I wish I had the link for you. I'll give it to you later. But these great photographs that represented every letter of the alphabet and the word, a social justice kind of related word. And they kind of put these giant photographs on all the windows of the school facing out. So this is a downtown school. Everyone who's walking by is seeing these kids kind of like represent this alphabet in this new way. And he shares it on his blog. He shares it then to I think he writes for Edutopia. So he spreads it out beyond just the classroom walls, so it rises above the level of the making in the class to making in connecting with other educators, and not even just educators, folks who are maybe interested in education, right? So.
Yeah, that made me think of here in Philadelphia when we were facing a bunch of layoffs, and Anissa and Kelly and other folks, but the folks that were a part of like the Working Educators Caucus developed a campaign that kind of like tapped into this flip the script, where they created Faces of the Layoff, and simply like went around having teachers take selfies or pictures of like folks that were being laid off or the impact of laying off, and like blasting that, and it had like a real resonant impact. And again, this is just teachers using like things that we may do with our students, but then now like we're flipping the script and using it for projects that could have direct impact on on us as well. But you guys remember that campaign, the Face of the Layoff?
Yeah, it's awesome. I just found a link about it at the Media Mobilizing Project. So we should tweet that out. And I got the SLA, Social Justice Alphabet, still has a beautiful webpage where you can see all the work that the kids did too.
I would say that was a really powerful, it was very powerful. I remember seeing those pictures and the way that it resonated, not just with me, but folks outside the community. And I'd also say, to remind folks, the balance of that was happening and projecting those stories. And on the inside, and Sam could probably speak to this, there's also a real need to kind of build to that the organizing doesn't just exist in those broadcasted kind of spaces. That I went to one of the tag book groups last year. They have a book group every summer where Sam and I are leading one this year. But last year I went to one. It was the book was Secrets of a Successful Organizer, because I'm trying to learn about all the organizing. And one of the most poignant things that one of the organizers said is that the most important thing is the phone call and the text reminding people by phone call and text to come and show up and come to the meeting, and building those, and also just the face-to-face sitting down and having coffee together about stuff. So I think we don't want to we want to remind folks that that these digital are really important for amplifying voice and for putting and flipping the scripts and sharing the stories. And at the same time, it's really critical to build the roots deep by fostering relationships on a kind of closer level. So it has to be happening at the same time. And I'll let kind of Sam jump in.
Yes. I just want to talk about like how the work of transformative teachers is also like kind of transforming PD, right? Professional development. And so this professional development, we're looking at avenues of like connecting with community. We're looking at avenues to connect with one another. We're leading some of the PD, like our summer book group. So that's like professional development. We're going to get together. We're going to read intently a book or two. And sometimes out of that book becomes an inquiry to action group. And then through that inquiry action group, that becomes a way of forming a new campaign, right? And so it's really important to think about like how transformative teachers are also transforming professional development, but also because we become interested in like learning, like using media tools or using social media, that we may go to professional development that's not really necessarily teacher professional development. So we may go, for example, to Media Mobilizing Project to become a media fellow. Mm-hmm. And then through the media fellow, we get connected with Media Mobilizing Project. And then Media Mobilizing Project now is doing campaigning to help not only educators, but like nurses or firemen, or, like these interconnected nodes, which bolsters teachers' work when we need support. And again, we don't do this work in isolation, and that's really important. But I really wanted to just mark that transformative teachers are also transforming professional development, and it's even being recognized, I think, by institutionally by school districts. For example, in Philadelphia, there's a PD series that is totally led by teachers, and teachers propose teach lessons or sessions, and bring in community partners, and it's that's been really powerful to like see the district kind of like allow teachers to kind of lead this professional development, and then even when they're doing like we had a teacher symposium that was totally led by the district, but they put a call out to teachers and these networks to help facilitate that professional development. And again, it's the transformative teachers that are doing this work. And so in some ways, transformative teachers are being recognized and being valued. And that's really important as well, because again, that validates our work, and it makes us want to keep doing it. And so that's really important.
Yeah, and I would say that Sam is telling a local story that is really powerful, and that's not that pattern is not just local. That we see a lot of when those kinds of efforts by teachers come together, they really do bear fruit in terms of professional development. And I would say you can see, I think the Ed Camp has had an interesting impact on professional development. I mean, this Department of Education held an Ed Camp, or a couple Ed Camps last year, which says a lot that they were converts, right? And their language changed in like the Department of Education. This is last year, but the language about professional development and teaching changed significantly in the last 2 or 3 years, and it started to match a lot of the language that was being put out by teachers. about what leadership means, about what it means to kind of participate in and lead professional development. So so the teachers are really being heard, and it's fascinating to see that that impact. So I think, again, like going back to that, when I was talking about the landscape, we have the landscape of all these kind of cultural movements coming together, and it's this very exciting change, although it's also a change that is, in some ways, the stories are not being told enough, right? They're a little bit, I think, sometimes not told to the extent that they could. I think they're told sometimes when teachers are organizing, it's the work that they're doing is described as kind of just doing some digital connecting kind of thing. That's not accurate. That they're actually doing organizing and reorganizing professional development, you know. And so I guess what Sam's story and kind of some of the patterning that you see speaks to some of the potential and some of the importance of continuing to share stories. So one of the things that, like, I want to see more of is people sharing those stories out, of the ways that they're transforming, the ways that they're organizing, whether they're leveraging digital technologies or not, but the ways that they're connecting and transforming, because there's a shift, you know, and we need to hear those stories more.
Great. We only have a few minutes left. One of the things that maybe we can go into some final thoughts, and also I was thinking also about our next session on July 6th, I believe, where we'll talk about designing, organizing, and leading, and this idea of, like, so I guess one of my final thoughts to connect to that is this idea that knowledge is sort of, it's not that super teacher narrative where, you know, there's sort of knowledge in this one place and it gets disseminated outward. You know, I really think in your book, you're really showing how actually, like, we're creating shared spaces of knowledge, and we're doing that alongside each other, and we're doing that alongside our students, and everybody's knowledge is important in that mix, and that it's not, that actually these are deeply relational stories that are happening. They're not individual only, and that and therefore, and that a lot of these shifts start to sort of make those, like, the opportunity to recognize our shared expertise. I mean, Sam, I love that story of how your student took this thing and he knew what he was interested in, and he sort of developed the project, you know, to sort of match the needs that he had for himself and for his work, and how that influenced your teaching and your thinking about the sort of way that you were supporting your classroom. So so anyway, I guess I'm really excited to sort of take those ideas and move into a discussion about continuing, like, how people have been designing, leading, organizing through this work. How can we continue to design and lead and organize through this work? And I really invite anybody listening to participate in that conversation. I know that Kira and Sam are, like, organizing right now to continue this conversation too, both online and here in Philadelphia. So maybe you guys could talk about that, and then we'll move into sort of final thoughts before we close.
Kira, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, Sam and I are going to be, like I mentioned, we're going to be leading a book group through the Teacher Action Group and Caucus of Working Educators book series groups this summer. I think there's a link available. Yes, Christina's nodding yes. If you're interested in signing up for that, if you're in Philly, and if you're at a distance, you can kind of join in some of the conversations at the Facebook group for book clubs or individual readers, folks who are reading the book and kind of want to check in or share their story. So those are two ways to connect and to organize and to start having those conversations with others. And as I will talk about next week, it is a book group is a form of an agentive tool, agentive practice, and I'll explain that a little bit more next time, not next week, but the next time we have a webinar, I'll explain more why that is. Sam, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I just wanted to say thanks, Christina, for having us, and Kira for, again, our ongoing collaboration. And actually, like, talking this out, I'm working on a little short article, like, with like what's everyday advocacy, and I think I've pretty much written the article out in our notes. So I'm going to go back to the archive here, and I've included the link on the sidebar there for like this link around everyday advocacy, because I think that's how we should kind of like look at this work. Again, it's like just ordinary teachers doing the extraordinary stuff that we do. Again, it's been an honor being here and sharing, and you know, amazing stuff is going to come out of even this conversation. So thanks again.
Thank you both.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. And thank you, Kira, for putting this book together and for sort of bringing these ideas. I feel like a lot of us are in these milieus, and having a chance to really think about like how it all fits together is really lovely. And I have to say that Sam's the one who really in my life has also reminded me, like, right, Media Mobilizing Project, be the media fellow, connect with those people. Like, these are really important resources for all the teaching and learning that we do for ourselves and support others and do with others. So that kind of asset mapping in this really powerful way I've been watching for many years, and I've just learned a ton and been inspired by completely. So thank you all for being here to talk about this work, and I'm really excited about this summer and want to sort of figure out how to continue these conversations here too. Kira, you mentioned the Facebook group too, right? So we'll get this. Okay, great. And again, we will be back here at Educator Innovator on July 6th, this same time, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, to talk about designing, organizing, leading in a connected world. And then on July 20th, we will continue the conversation and really talk about transformative teachers and educational change. So thank you all for being here, and looking forward to more ahead.